Let's talk about social unrest. You're inside the Mom Stuff Coffee Shop, a podcast dedicated to helping you get back up again, turning your pain into power and your trauma into triumph. I find joy in helping you get back up again and thrive. Today, we're talking about social unrest in America from a mother's perspective. We are joined by Aleisha Frazier, corporate nurse and mother of 5, 4 of which are African American males. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, a little bit about what our country is going through at this present moment. This is our reality. There has been worldwide outrage over the death of an unarmed African-American male, George Floyd. Witnessed all around the world, Mr. Floyd was unarmed, handcuffed, and asphyxiated with a knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds by a white police officer. African-American males have been disproportionately treated unfairly by police departments all over America for centuries. Mr. Floyd and other cases have sparked worldwide unrest, and other cases such as Breonna Taylor, who was shot by the police in her home unarmed. And a lot of unrest has been particularly because there is no justice. For such cases like Rodney King that happened over 20 years ago, African Americans have seen no systemic change. This is traumatizing on so many levels. In the recent case with George Floyd, so many countries, not only the United States, but so many countries allied against police brutality and injustice in our justice system. A country that says there is justice for all. The whole world witnessed this traumatic event. An officer killing an unarmed black man with his hands behind his back, handcuffed. That will be in our minds forever. This led to worldwide protests, stand-ins, and rioting. So since the death of Mr. Floyd, I have received so many emails from corporations apologizing for systemic injustice against African American people, granting change, verbalizing what everyone has been thinking for many years. Injustice, not being heard, being overlooked. This is an American tragedy. So today we're going to talk to Aleisha on her perspective on social unrest and learn about how can we be the change? How can we be the light? How can we be the source of turning this thing around in our cultures, in our influence, in our families, and around the world? So join us as we explore social unrest in America. So welcome to the show, Aleisha.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So many African American males and females are directly affected by police brutality and social injustice. So in your opinion, why is there social unrest in America?
To understand social unrest in America, I applied part of what I do in corporate nursing. And one of the things that we do is called a root cause analysis. In root cause analysis, we ask 5 whys to get to the root cause of a problem. That way, when you go to the root of the problem, you're able to understand and make interventions to correct the problem. And the first thing you have to recognize is, what is the problem? So right now we have social unrest in America. So we ask ourselves, why? And it's directly related to the killing of an unarmed African-American man by police. Well, why is that? Because many African-American men and women that have been unarmed have been killed by the police. Well, why is that? So we have to recognize and admit that America is still not fair to people of color when it comes down to the justice system, economically and socially. Well, why is that? The civil rights movement moved us a little bit further, but it did not change the hearts or the minds of the oppressors. Well, why is that? Mainly because African Americans were brought to this country for slave labor. They were not recognized or considered a full human being. So when you think about civil unrest and social unrest and all the systems that oppress people of color, you have to remember there is a thought process in some individuals that still has not evolved. They have not been enlightened, nor do they ascribe to the thinkings of great philosophers like John Locke, who we borrowed his definition of freedom in our Constitution that states that every man has an inalienable right to have the pursuit of life, happiness, and property, and that it is not a right that is given by men, but it is our God-given gift. And until all minds acknowledge that God has given us the gift of freedom, we will still have oppression.
So I wanted to do this podcast so that other cultures might understand that African Americans have already an internal trauma towards racism, not particularly a hostility, but an awareness in the background always in our minds towards unfairness, towards discomfort, and towards an unrest, not knowing how we'll be treated on different platforms, at work, at schools, opportunities, job interviews, and the list goes on. So my question to you is, did you experience any direct racism raising your 4 African American sons in America that gave you fear, discomfort, or unrest in any area of your life or their lives?
There are a couple of experiences that do stand out. One of them is that always knowing that you have to be a little bit more careful with your sons. There was one instance where one of my sons, who is African American man, and he has a friend, Carlos, and John. John is my son and Carlos was his friend, and Carlos is a Hispanic man. We lived in a fairly mixed neighborhood of Black, white, a few Hispanics. And one day they found a television set. It was a big television set on the side of the road that said free. So they picked it up and they walked home with it to put it in his room. And I got so upset. And they could not understand, why are you upset? The TV said free. And all I can think of, if someone rode past African-American little boy and Hispanic little boy walking down the street with a television, would they call the police? Would they be shot? Would they be taken to jail? Even though this was a free television, but because of the stereotypes that the media, that are in the papers, the first thing someone would think is that they had stolen that television set. And so that really resonated with me, that I must teach them to be more careful. Even something as innocent as picking up a television that somebody left on the side of the road could end up costing them their freedom or their life. The second incident was a police stop. This particular day, I was in the passenger side of my car and had allowed my oldest son, who was about 19, to drive. And then my 3 other sons were in the back seat. And so we were driving from a mall in the area that we lived, and they were pulled over. They had not done anything wrong. My son was an excellent driver, learned through driver's ed. And when we got pulled over, I gave him, be calm and let's just see what he's talking about. And so he questioned him, asked for the registration, and I let the officer know that it's my car. This is my son and he's driving it. And the officer made a comment about, oh, I guess you guys played a lot of Grand Theft Auto, huh? And I was so appalled because I had never allowed my children to play Grand Theft Auto because I didn't think there was anything entertaining about Grand Theft Auto because they get awarded for running over people and stealing cars. So I had never allowed them to play that game, but just that comment made me know that that officer thought very low of Black men. Now, had I not been in the car, I often wondered, how would that stop have been? Because here's this officer trying to kid with them, but I took it very offensive because in essence, I took it as, oh, y'all practice stealing cars, huh? So those are two incidents that really stuck out with me. And then the third incident that stuck out with me, and mind you, no harm came to them, but it just made me realize that these are Black young men and you need to teach them to be more careful. There was some young lady that came over to my house. My house was the hangout house. And so this particular day, I was working nights, and my son, daughter, my oldest son, and my other sons were there. And because I had boys there, it was always a hangout house. Everybody wanted to hang out at our house. But this young lady, I didn't know her. And she was a Caucasian young lady. And it got later and later. And I'm just looking at her like, and they're outside. And I'm like, wow, it's getting dark and I have to go to work. And so it got to be about 9:30. And I'm like, oh no, she has to go home, because I don't even allow my teenage daughter, who at that time was almost 18, and she couldn't be hanging out at night. So I asked her, I said, well, where do you live? And is somebody coming to pick you up? And she's like, no, I live not too far. And I said, well, let's take you home, because I didn't want her there. She's a young lady and I'm just being courteous to take her home. So she doesn't live too far from us. So my son automatically said, okay, Mom, well, let me take the car and I'll take her home. And I was like, no, I'm going to get in the car and go home with her, because A, she's a girl and you're boys, but also she's a Caucasian girl and you are African-American men, is what I'm thinking in my head. So we drive up to her house. Her dad bursts out, come running out, and he has a pen and a paper, and he starts taking down the tag number and like, oh yeah, you guys are going to jail. So I jumped out of the car in defense of my sons. And I told him, I said, first of all, I brought her home so that she would not be out at night. They are not doing anything. She was hanging around my house at night, and I'm surprised that you don't have better control over your daughter. You're so busy trying to get my tag number that you're not even addressing the problem that your daughter is outside at 9:30 at night. And I was infuriated, because my sons could have went to prison that night, because this girl, this Caucasian girl, is in the car being dropped off by African-American men. So even something simple as giving a child a ride could have turned into something life-changing or life-ending for my sons.
Yes.
So there is always an awareness that you must teach your sons in the African American community to be careful, even with the most innocent seeming things.
And that is so true. And I also think that the conversation exposes the fact that there are underlying biases towards African Americans from other cultures that they may or may not be aware of, such as the police officer, the dad, and also understanding that there are awarenesses that we have and consciousness that we have. According to your story about the Caucasian young lady, you knew that your Black son did not need to be with this Caucasian girl after a certain time. And we all have heard stories when we were little about the Emmett Tills and the fruits on the hanging trees and all these horrible stories about African American men being caught with Caucasian women. And today there are flourishing communities of biracial children and love that is different cultures merging together. But as an African American mother, there are also awarenesses and consciousness that there's a background fear, if you will, when you see certain things happening that are racial.
Yeah, and it's things that would be normal for other people would be looked at differently because they are African Americans. And I do have biracial grandchildren, and even they feel racism. One of my granddaughters, she lives in Pennsylvania in a fairly non-African American surrounding. And I visited her this last January, and she had told me, without me even asking her, you know, Nana, there's only one other brown girl like me at school. And so I pondered that, and I said, wow, she's only 5. How does she know the difference? Because generally children don't see color. When children, they see it, but they don't recognize their differences because of their color. So I just guess that maybe someone told her or made her feel like she was different. And I just gave her a big hug and kissed her and told her to do very well in school.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's a wonderful solution to that perhaps traumatic experience in her mind. So the next question I want to ask you is, how have you prepared your sons for a society that doesn't always embrace them?
You have to love them through it. Everybody knows that, you have to be extra careful when you are a Black male, and you have to educate them, not just on the wrongs of society, but you really need to educate your children. Give them a strong foundation, give them a strong self-worth, give them pride in who they are. You also have to let them know about their culture so that they can take pride in their culture. I can remember, always thinking that I would grow up to be something in healthcare, and you could not imagine my glee, just pure joy to find out that the first open heart surgery was done by someone just like me, Dr. Daniel Hale Williams. So it's important, not just during Black History Month, but all during the year, to teach them about their culture, teach them about the Henry Sampsons and how they invented the cell phone, and not just people far away, but Thurgood Marshall and how he was the first Black Supreme Court justice, Clarence Thomas, and that there are great individuals in every aspect of our humanness. There are great philosophers that were people of color. There are great physicians. There are great mechanics. There are great athletes. There are great customer service. You have to bathe them in the successes of people of their color. You have to demystify success so that they too can feel like, I am a person of importance.
Okay, so the next point I wanted to bring up and ask you is, we all know how we have the talk about the birds and the bees. So what particularly from an African-American mother is the talk towards African-American males?
There are many conversations in an African-American home, and I don't think it's one talk, but I think it's just many conversations that we have with our children, easing them into the reality of what they have been born into, which is, again, what I say, a country that does not fully embrace them because of their color, because of the history of our country. And you just namely go over things about having good etiquette. What is proper etiquette when you are pulled over by the police? Being respectful, living to tell your side of the story, meaning that you don't pop off, you don't agitate the police, because that could be the difference of you getting a ticket or you getting a toe tag, depending on the person that you're dealing with. The second one is just be a good character. Keep yourself out of trouble, because we all know that the justice system is not the same for people of color than it is for people not of color. Because our sentences are harder, we do more time. And this is all things that you can look up statistically when you look up the statistics of the people who are in prison. And African Americans typically get more time for the same crime. So I always pushed good character to them. Now, I can't say that goes without saying that one of them did get in trouble. And I want to just give this little piece. Not all police officers are bad, and not all of them want to kill us. I have had many interactions with the police that were positive, particularly one incident when my youngest son, who got in trouble, and I had officers come with very big guns to my home. And they explained, this is why he's in trouble, and this is what needs to happen, and you need to have him call us. And they were very respectful. They were not disrespectful. And he goes on to say that when they did come to arrest him, they still had like the big guns, but he sat down and waited for his transport vehicle, and they actually gave him help for life, telling him, okay, you're still young. You can still turn this around. You can still do this differently. So not all police officers are out there trying to harm us, but you do need to teach your African American sons to have good character, to have good interactions, and to have good conflict resolutions that one pop off could actually cost them their life. And not just with the police, but at any given time. Soft answers turns away wrath. And I would say, we talked a lot about and had dialogue back and forth about different situations. But the main thing I would say is for them to have upstanding character and maintain good etiquette. And that is not a promise that something bad will not happen, but it will definitely decrease the likelihood of something bad happening. And as we know, there are still tragedies where, the young man was in his own home and the police officer came in and shot him and things like that. But overall, just teaching them to be good men and reaffirming their worth and letting them know that they are important. They're important to us. They're important to society, and reaffirming the love that you have for them, because has to be one of the reasons I think, and this is not medically proven, but just what I think, that the instances of high blood pressure and early death in African American men, there has to be some correlation with the background stress of just experiencing racism and how that may raise the blood pressure and put more stress on the body. Because there's certain things that a non-black parent is not going to have to explain to their child about how to act. We have the same talks that other ethnicities have, but we have to add in that part. Remember, you're a black man, so you have to be more careful.
Those are such good points. Now I wanted to talk a little bit about Black Lives Matter. This movement for justice, for equity, for equality in America and all over the world. And so many people have a toil with Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. And I think what people are trying to say is, yes, all lives matter. But right now and forever and before, Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. Black lives need to be under the microscope for change and equality in America and beyond. And that's what Black people are saying and other races are saying in unity with African Americans. And this is a wonderful movement shining light on disparity, shining light on inequality and justice. Now, my question to you is, moving forward, what are your concerns? What are your hopes for the Black Lives Matter movement? And this podcast is all about helping you get back up again. So what would you say to America, to the Black mothers who have experienced injustice or who have experienced unfairness in every area? What are your hopes and concerns? And how do we get back up again from experiences like this?
I would say vote. That has been paramount in moving civil rights forward. And I think our generation, which I'm 50, has not embraced it like the previous generation. And because the previous generation embraced voting and standing up for their rights, we have not experienced not being able to go into a certain restaurant or sit at a counter or use a certain water fountain because of our color. And I think we don't need to lose that. Now, whether you're Democrat or Republican, you just need to have your voice heard. And when we talk about Black Lives Matter, this movement does not exclude any other life. What this movement says is that there is a unparalleled occurrences of Black people being assaulted, being murdered by the same entities that are supposed to be protecting them. And it is an unprecedented number that other ethnicities are not experiencing. So it has nothing to do with which race life matters. It's saying because we matter too, TOO, also included, that our lives matter, that it matters if we die from the hands of those who are supposed to protect us. It matters to our families. It matters to society. It matters that we are not living up to the Constitution that is promised to us. And my hopes are that America would be the beacon of light that it was planned to be. That just like John Locke said, that every man's inalienable rights for liberty, justice, property, and to be free would be upheld, and that we all would be a United States, not just the states and the land, but actually united in mindset. I often think of America, who was supposed to be the great beacon of light to all the world, and how we rally for human rights to be violated on a daily basis, to be a country that says we are the leader in how to run your country. We need to run ours better. There's a saying in the African American community that you need to sweep in front of your own front door first before you point out the dirt over there on your neighbor's stoop. And I think that America needs to sweep in front of their front door. There is a ugly truth about America that we need to be better. We really need to be better when it comes down to human rights. And human rights are all human rights. They're not just for African Americans or Asians or Caucasians. It's a human right. It's a person. It's a right to be alive.
Yes.
A right to be able to pursue economic advantages. The right to work hard and live the supposedly American dream that everybody has access to. And until that happens, I don't think we will be the great country that was envisioned for us.
Aleisha, thank you for stepping inside the Mom Stuff Coffee Shop and talking about this issue that is an elephant in the room on so many levels in corporations and families, even in our own minds. Sometimes we don't want to admit what's right in front of us. And I think our listeners can take so many things from this conversation. How can we use these tools, these tips and strategies in our own lives to uncover biases and unfairness in our minds? How can we move forward and treat the next person with true equality, true justice? I always say from Oprah Winfrey, everyone is in the back of the room saying, do I matter? Do you hear me? Do you see me? Does my life matter? And for all the brown people around the world, I want to tell you, your life matters. It has always mattered and it will always matter. And I want every other culture around the world to pass the torch and carry the torch of justice, peace, and most of all, love. The Bible said, now hope, faith, and love remains, but the greatest of these is love. Thank you, friends, for stepping inside the Mom Stuff Coffee Shop. I'm KK Smith. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
So, friends, I realized that was a heavy show, a heavy topic. But I want you to think about, how can I be a part of the solution? What steps can I take to eradicate biases, judgments, and unfair practices in my own life? How can I bring in more love and peace into this universe, into this world? And friends, every time that you are faced with the decision to choose love or hate, choose love. Thank you for joining me, friends. You can learn all about our guest in the show notes, anywhere this podcast is available. And remember, you can always celebrate wins and get back up again inside the Mom Stuff Coffee Shop.